the Messenger-Inquirer's Gridiron Report, sponsored by Carpets Unlimited and Crandall's Home Furnishings. I'm Messenger-Inquirer sports editor Scott Hagerman, and with me is Messenger-Inquirer sports writer Jim Pickens. And Jim, I'm excited about the show. We did it last year, and I think we've worked out some kinks, and I think we're in for a better show this year.
I think so too. I'm excited to get started. We got our first week underway, and I'm excited to get going with the 2010 season.
Now, the show's going to be streamed live every Monday and Thursday at 2 p.m., and then, of course, it'll be available on demand anytime after that. And the shows will stay up throughout the high school football season. So if you miss one show in week 2 and you want to catch it in week 5, it will be there. You just go to the Messenger-Inquirer homepage at www.messenger-inquirer.com, and you do not have to be a subscriber to get the show. So we hope you have a lot of fun watching it this year. I know we plan on having a lot of fun doing it. And we're going to start out this week talking about a couple of things that made news before the games actually began. The big one being D.C., Davis County, getting hit with sanctions for something that happened last year. Talk a little bit about that.
I'll talk about briefly, Scott. Davis County had a player who came up, turns out, 0.2 of a credit short to be eligible for the 2009 season. And Davis County didn't discover this actually until early 2010, and they self-reported themselves to the Kentucky High School Athletic Association, and it turns out they had some sanctions levied against them. The most important of which is that Coach Marcus Kimbrell is going to have to sit out the first game, which is the Border Bowl game against Bowling Green High School, which that's a tough blow for them.
Well, they forfeit 3 games
Correct.
that they won last year. I think the fine was $300.
That's right.
And as you say, Coach Kimbrell has to sit out the Border Bowl game.
That's right.
What do you feel like? Do you feel like the infraction, which was just a kid barely missing on GPA and being in the games, I mean, do you feel like the KHSAA, do you like the ruling they made, or do you feel like it was a little heavy-handed?
I thought it was a little heavy-handed. I understand the KHSAA goes by precedent on a lot of these rulings, and I think that's probably what happened here. But personally, I think it's a little excessive because with regard to this particular GPA issue or credit issue, Coach Kimbrell was not directly involved, and I thought it was a little heavy to knock him out of a regular season game like this.
Yeah, I just don't like the fact that they're carrying over something from last year into this year.
Right.
Something that's not what I would call a major violation.
And I will say one other thing about that too. I think that when you get 3 victories taken away from you, that's penalty enough.
Absolutely.
Really. It took their season from 4-6 to 1-9, and I mean that's enough right there.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question Marcus Kimbrell should be on the sideline coming up this weekend. Talk about this other issue. Week 0 is what we just had. Week 0.
Right.
Week 0 just rubs me the wrong way that teams can decide whether to play this past weekend or wait because they want a bye week during the year. I understand the concept. Some teams like having the bye week, some don't.
Right.
But what's your thought on not everybody starting the season at the same time?
Well, I would prefer it to be uniform. I think that everyone really should start the season at the same time. And I think that, you know, it really, in a way, kind of hurts the KHSAA a little bit when you have maybe, like in our case, we had 2 or 3 local games, but then we have our really big kickoff this week with the Border Bowl, for instance. So in our community, it really, you know, it's sort of a preliminary opening week to what we refer to as the big opening week. So I'm like you. I wish it was uniform across the board.
Well, I just think it takes away from opening weekend. We had 3 games, 5 teams involved from our coverage area. And then, like you say, then we have the Border Bowl coming up next weekend, which I just feel like should be the kickoff. And you did a story where Marcus Kimbrell was quoted as saying that he thinks the Border Bowl should be the kickoff for
That's right. And I think that our 4 local coaches are actually working on a plan to possibly, even within the context of the way the setup is right now with week 0, I think that they're working on a plan possibly to begin the season on week 1. And so all of our local teams would be off on week 0. They're trying to work that out where their true opening night is the Border Bowl.
Last thing before we get to our first highlight from last weekend, you know, there's always somebody coming into a new season feeling a little pressure to win. Who's feeling the pressure, in your opinion, coming into this year?
I think that the 2 coaches that come to mind feel have to be feeling some pressure are Todd Houston at Ohio County. They've dropped 20 in a row. And if that's not pressure, I don't know what is. And Todd's a great guy, and I think is a very good coach. But so far, things have not meshed for the Eagles under his direction. Hopefully, they can turn that around this year. Also, I think Coach John Edge, after a 3-8 season, that's certainly uncharacteristic for Owensboro Catholic. And I think that they've had two seasons in a row which were subpar. And John's had some very good seasons, we should point out. And I think that as we'll get to here in a minute, I think that the Aces are on the rise again. So I think that John and the Aces are going to take care of business and alleviate a lot of that pressure this year.
Oh, I'm very high on the Aces, and I covered them, and we'll talk about that, but they looked great the first game. But I thought coming into the year that they were primed to really turn it around this year.
Yeah.
Ohio County, we'll see Friday night.
Yeah, we'll know a lot.
We'll know a lot more about
game.
what direction they're headed.
That's right.
Well, let's talk about our first game from this past weekend. It was Muhlenberg County coming into Apollo, and Apollo takes a 44-26 win. And Jim, this one looked like it was totally going to get out of hand at halftime, 30-0. But then Muhlenberg did make a game of it, I guess you would say.
Yeah, what happened in this one, Scott, Muhlenberg really was its own worst enemy. The Mustangs turned the ball over several times in the early going, and before you could even sit down almost at Apollo Stadium, it was 16-0, and then Apollo built that up to 30-0 at halftime. To Muhlenberg County's credit, and I mean immense credit, they scored 20 points in a row in the fourth quarter to cut this game to 30-20 with about 6 minutes to go, and it really started getting interesting there. But also to Apollo's credit, the Eagles put them away with consecutive touchdowns, and just showed me that they're going to be a little bit better, I think, than some people anticipated. They lost a lot of key people last year. They lost DJ McHenry. They lost Harris Biven. They lost their quarterback, Hunter Cannon, as you know. But nonetheless, the Eagles are going to be tough.
Well, you wrote a story in Sunday's paper about Corbin Jewell, quarterback, first-year starter, replacing Hunter Cannon, and rightfully so, that he gets recognition, 11-16 for 144 yards, 1 touchdown. What really impressed you about him?
His decision-making for a young man who's basically stepping out onto the varsity field under the fire for the first time. I thought he made excellent decisions, Scott, and knew when to tuck the ball away and run, knew when to throw the ball away. You know, that's one of those lost arts. Sometimes high school quarterbacks often try to force the ball in. He didn't do that. He waited patiently for his receivers to get open before releasing the ball, and Corbin had a great week also because his line did an exceptional job against a really good Muhlenberg County defensive line.
And it also helps to have a good running back sitting back there behind you. And the Eagles certainly have that in Elijah Dillard, 83 yards for 13 carries, 3 touchdowns. We expect him to be a big part of the offense, and it looks like he is going to be a big part of the offense.
Yeah, he's got a nose for the end zone, Scott. He's a relatively still young guy. He's a junior, early in his junior year, and he's small, but he doesn't mind running inside, and that's the thing that I really like about him. When you combine his running with the threat that they have with Andrew Owen and Jonathan Rasco at receiver, Jewell's got a lot to work with this year, and it's going to help him being a first-year starter to have so many weapons to call on.
Muhlenberg gets off to such a bad start that, you know, they could have easily folded the camp right there.
Absolutely.
But they do come back strong. What did you see from them in the second half that you weren't seeing in the first half and shows you that there's real potential here? And Dalton Oliver,
yeah.
You know, he throws for 151 yards and 3 TDs. I guess it all starts with him.
It does start with him. He's one of those young men who has a lot of confidence. He doesn't mind hanging in the pocket and taking a big hit if he has to. I like that about him. And they've also just got some playmakers out there. Johnny Miller made some, he was in on 2 of those touchdowns. And Muhlenberg, once they kind of settled down, I thought it just took them a half to settle down. Sometimes that happens on the first game. Mm-hmm. Now, Apollo came out, I thought, very confident on their home field, and sometimes that helps. Muhlenberg didn't feel that way. It didn't look to me until the second half. And once they did get their feet, I thought that they played pretty darn well. I was impressed with Muhlenberg in the second half.
So Muhlenberg's going to be somebody teams are going to have to contend with.
I think Muhlenberg, as we know, they finished 3-8 last year. I think Muhlenberg is going to be going to be better. I think the record's going to be better this year.
Okay, that'll be interesting. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back in a minute and take a look at the Owensboro Catholic, McLean County matchup.